Discover the incredible transformation, how a black maid's unexpected act changed a billionaire. Janelle scrubbed the marble countertop with fervor, feeling every muscle in her body tighten as she longed for the familiar phantom of rest. The penthouse exuded an elegance that felt miles away from her Bronx apartment. Here, luxury dripped from every surface. Yet, standing amidst this opulence, she couldn't shake the gnawing ache in her chest. What did it mean to rise above, to do right? As she polished, she thought of Malik, her 16-year-old, dreaming of being a filmmaker while she fought to keep their heads above water. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, drowning her dreams beneath layers of responsibility. Her thoughts spiraled as she carefully positioned the vase of imported lilies, a symbol of a world far removed from her own. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly doorman she admired, was often a beacon in her daily grind. He loved that building, and she often caught him whistling with joy in his tiny booth. But today, something felt off. She overheard snippets of a conversation that sent chills through her. Richard, the billionaire with an all-consuming thirst for success and prestige, discussed plans to eliminate the position of Mr. Jenkins. "It's just a cost-cutting measure," he laughed, as if that decision wouldn't affect the life of a man who had devoted decades to service. The revelation swirled in her mind, igniting flames of conflict within her. Should she speak up, risk her own job to defend a man who had done nothing but show kindness to all? The tension strained her thoughts, edging her closer to a precipice. Doubts clawed at her. What about Malik's future? Wouldn't silent complicity grant her more time to save for his ambitions? But in the deep recesses of her heart, she bristled at the thought of abandoning Mr. Jenkins. He deserved better. He always had. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Breathless, her heart raced as she pictured Richard sitting on his leather chair, oblivious to the ripple effects of his decisions. Should her loyalty to Mr. Jenkins outweigh her instinct for self-preservation? The moral scales tilted with every passing second as sweat beaded on her forehead. Janelle's resolve slowly hardened, and she found herself thinking of the values her mother held sacred: dignity, integrity, courage. With her mind racing and her body trembling, she knew that this could be the moment her life shifted. The stakes were higher than ever. As she approached Richard, a thin veneer of confidence masked her internal storm. Her voice quaked as she confronted him, words spilling with an urgency she couldn't contain. The air crackled with tension, their worlds colliding amidst the backdrop of luxury. Richard blinked, skepticism in his eyes, but something in her struck a chord. While he was used to empire building, Janelle was fighting for a life for her son, her community, and Mr. Jenkins. As their conversation deepened, she could see the discomfort flutter across Richard's face, the struggle penetrating his confident demeanor. It wasn't just about Mr. Jenkins anymore. The truth stirred something buried deep within him, knocking against the frail walls of his carefully curated existence. Janelle had thrown a wrench into his perfectly executed plan, and she wasn't sure if he'd push back or let that newly opened door lead somewhere transformative. The uncertainty loomed heavily as Richard began to question everything he stood for. And right before her very eyes, the question became clearer than ever. Would he, too, stand at a crossroads? As she awaited his response, moments unexpectedly stretched into an agonizing eternity. Janelle felt the tremors inside, the weight of all they represented. Power, sacrifice, dignity hung precariously in the balance. Would she be the catalyst of change, or merely another voice fading into silence? Janelle stood poised, her breath holding steady in the charged atmosphere between her and Richard. The penthouse felt both grand and suffocating. the exquisite surroundings showcasing a world she barely belonged to. Richard's piercing gaze shifted from disbelief to something resembling intrigue. This was new terrain for him, and he didn't like it. His meticulously constructed empire was quaking at its foundation, and she was the earthquake. "You think a few words can change the course of my decisions?" he asked, his tone clipped, masking the ripple of uncertainty beneath his polished exterior. Janelle's heart pounded in her ears. The stakes had never felt higher, and vulnerability seeped in. Yet she clung to the conviction that her voice mattered, that speaking out could resonate far beyond this moment. "It's not just words, it's the impact of those choices that linger. You have a chance here, not to just save Mr. Jenkins' job, but to do something actually meaningful." His dark eyebrows knit together as Janelle leaned slightly forward, hoping to breach the divide. The silence seemed expansive, stretching between them like an unseen chasm. She observed the conflict in his eyes, the flicker of a man grappling with the humanity of his decisions. The thought of Malik surged forth, the intense desire to provide for his dreams threading through her determination. She was not merely a maid in a penthouse adorned with luxury. She was his mother, a tower of dreams for her son. This was for Malik. "Every person you let go has a story, a worth that goes beyond your bottom line," she pressed, her voice steadier. "Mr. Jenkins means something to this building, to its residents. He represents dignity, not just for himself, but for everyone who walks through those doors. Is that not worth preserving?" Richard looked away momentarily, his jaw taut. She saw the internal struggle as he shifted in his seat. It was a conflict both unexpected and tangible, where power met raw emotion. "You don't understand." "No," Janelle interrupted, emboldened by the charge of the moment. "You don't understand. You're at a crossroads. You can continue down this path of profit at the expense of your humanity, or you can redefine what success means for you." Her words flicked a switch within him. The veneer of aloofness began to crack. He was a man who thrived on challenges, yet here she was, providing him an opportunity to confront something he had long shunned. Would he grasp it, or disregard her for the sake of maintaining his carefully constructed life? The room fell silent again, the weight of decisions palpable. Janelle felt lightness crossing her chest. The act of standing up to Richard had let a bit of air seep into her lungs, revitalizing a flame within her she thought had dimmed. It was empowering, standing there, speaking her truth. "Rich," she began again, not wanting to lose the moment, "this could be a chance for you to write your story differently. You could choose to be a part of something profound, something bigger than profits, a legacy based on kindness and not just wealth." A sly smile cracked across Richard's face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're not afraid to gamble, are you?" he replied, scrutinizing her closely, as if weighing her depth versus her circumstance. "No," she replied firmly, "because I know the cost of silence and the price of neglect. But you now have everything to gain or lose. So what will it be?" Richard contemplated her long and hard. A shiver of apprehension quivered in Janelle's belly. This moment could spiral in either direction. Was he prepared to meet her at this crossroads, where power met a challenge to re-evaluate humanity? As the finality of her question hung in the air, Janelle held her breath, waiting for either a break or breakthrough. Would this mark the turning point, not just for Mr. Jenkins, but potentially for both of their lives? The moment hummed with tension as Richard opened his mouth to speak, but just then, the unmistakable sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hall, interrupting their pivotal exchange. What would that uninvited arrival mean for their fate? Janelle's heart raced as the footsteps drew nearer, an unwelcome intrusion into a moment that had been charged with potential. She stole a glance at Richard, whose expression shifted from uncertainty to irritation as he straightened in his cushioned chair. The air crackled with unspoken thoughts, every second extending like a drawn-out breath. The door swung open, revealing a sharply dressed assistant looking flustered. "Mr. Hargrove, she faltered, taking in the tension between them. "I didn't realize you were—" "Out," Richard snapped, his command cutting through the assistant's hesitation.
Shut the door behind you." He turned back to Janelle, his intensity sharpening. The assistant left, and the silence returned, thick and uneasy. Janelle considered the significance of the interruption. It had felt similar to how life often trespassed at the worst moments. She could either let this moment slip away like sand through her fingers, or reclaim it with renewed fervor. Richard was distracted, but a flicker of determination ignited in her chest. "Was that a sign you need help from your sidekick?" she challenged lightly, seeking to rekindle the connection they had almost forged. His eyes flashed, an unreadable mix of defiance and something more vulnerable beneath the surface. "If you want to continue to operate within the confines of your world, you might miss out on the richness of what it means to be human." Richard rubbed his temple, the weight of her words visibly pressing on him. "You make it sound so easy, Janelle. Just flip a switch and become a savior?" "Not a savior, but a person willing to see beyond the ledger," she countered, unwilling to back down. "Your motivations are tangled in profit margins, but people are messy and complex. Mr. Jenkins deserves the chance to be seen." He leaned back, allowing her the space. But was it truly space, or a stall as he wrestled with doubt? The walls of the opulent penthouse surrounded them, opulence mingling with an uncommonly fragile atmosphere. "Considering the cost of this conversation," he began, revealing a thread of uncertainty. There was courage in his voice, though he didn't yet comprehend its magnitude. "Every decision has a cost, and one might be worth paying to uphold what's right," Janelle stated, her voice unwavering. The realization of the strength she wielded surged within her. Speaking out against a man of his stature was not just her act of rebellion, it was a herald of her own transformation, each word solidifying her identity. She imagined Malik's future, the dreams he carried unfurling like hope springing forth from dark soil. Would she challenge the chains that threatened to hold them down? This moment wasn't just about Richard's choices. It was her opportunity to define who she would become, not merely a worker trapped in low expectations, but a force for change. Richard regarded her with a new intensity. "I've built this life on structures you can't see or comprehend, but you're asking me disrupt everything?" "Yes, but think of what something new could provide." Her voice softened, sincerity weaving into her challenge. "What if you could create a legacy where your success isn't bolstered by sacrifice, but strengthened by a foundation of kindness?" His gaze shifted to the view beyond the glass walls, the sprawling city, seemingly alive, pulsing with stories of the very people he had forgotten. Her words pressed on him like a gentle nudge. He had the power to rewrite the tenets of his world, to puncture the bubbles of greed. "Perhaps you're right, Janelle," Richard began, his tone searching, but whatever epiphany he experienced was thwarted once more by the ringing of his phone. It blared an urgent notification, pulling him back to the clutches of his corporate reality. Janelle felt her pulse quicken again as Richard glanced at the screen, a new wave of tension surfacing in the room. She held her breath, knowing they stood on the precipice of a decision that could alter the course of their lives. But would this latest disruption push him back into complacency? The weight of the elusive momentum hung between them. Would Richard seize the moment and embrace his vulnerability, or retreat into the safety of inaction? The phone continued to ring, the insistent sound ringing like a clock announcing the impending passage of time, heightening the urgency of their exchange. Janelle waited, uncertain whether the next few moments were a prelude to potential freedom or a plunge back into silence. Was this his moment to redefine everything, or would he allow this opportunity to slip through his fingers like so many before? Time seemed to stretch infinitely as Richard's hand hovered over his phone, caught in a battle of priorities. The persistent ring echoed off the walls, each vibration a tangible reminder of the outside world clawing at the edges of their intimate standoff. Janelle recognized the dilemma etched on his face, a man torn between obligation and potential. Could she sustain this moment? She felt an urge to reach out, to grasp the raw vulnerability flickering within him like a flame. "Richard," she ventured, her tone wrapped in a cautious ebb, "this is your choice, just like every other decision you've made. You have a chance to decide who you want to be today, not just for your empire, but for yourself." His eyes darted back to her, wrestling with thoughts she couldn't fully access. Could he envision a life beyond profit and power? There was a tremor in his demeanor she hadn't noticed before, a crack forming in the facade of composure he'd long perfected. "Do you believe that?" he asked, his voice provisional, as though testing the very concept he'd rebutted not long before. "That I can just roar my way into a new reality?" "Yes," she answered firmly, her conviction buoying the uncertain words hanging between them. "But it requires you to confront the fear of letting go. You can't pen a new narrative without daring to erase some of what's written." His phone fell silent, the ringing ceasing as if the universe itself paused to listen. Reluctance danced in his expression, but the fight within him sparked an awakening, a burgeoning realization of what transformation could entail. They were playing in dangerous territory now, pushing against the edges of who he was and what he had become. "What if I fail?" he challenged, more to himself than to her, layering vulnerability beneath bravado. "Failure is just a misstep on the path to understanding your values. If anything, it will offer the clarity that success sometimes masks." Janelle leaned forward, closing the emotional distance. The true failure lies in not trying at all. A decision settled upon them both like a heavy shroud. Richard, poised to respond, found his confidence trembling under the weight of recognition. She was right. Each moment before him transcended what he knew, leading him toward a vision of an alternative legacy. But the shadows of his past still lingered, tethering him. "I've spent years building a reputation. For what? To be a name stamped on transactions devoid of compassion? Is that truly the legacy I want?" he pondered aloud, starting to question the values he had clung to for so long. Janelle felt encouraged, her own pulse synchronizing with his new rhythm. "Then shift it. Use that name to champion change. Be the man who sees. It begins here, in this space, with this choice." As he looked at her, something tightened in Richard's throat, a storm of emotions threatening to burst through. In that moment, Janelle realized she was witnessing the birth of something monumental, not just in him, but within herself as well. This was more than advocacy. It was a partnership woven from hope, a chance to sidestep the solitude they had both felt in their respective lives, professional and personal. She was not simply pushing against Richard's walls, but inviting him to consider dimensions he had long neglected. "I want to," but he hesitated, the prospect of vulnerability stirring a palpable fear within him. "But what?" she prompted gently, encouraging him to confront the terror that loomed large. "I don't know if I can maintain this new path," he confessed, the vulnerability rolling over him like thundering waves. "Transformation isn't about perfection, it's about persistence," she declared, her voice a reassuring balm. "Every small step counts, especially in a world that's taught you to run alone." A new clarity was emerging in Richard's gaze, coupled with trepidation as he navigated the unknowns laid before him. Janelle could feel something monumental brewing, a shared moment bursting with possibility. And yet, suddenly, the door swung open again, this time revealing Richard's business partner, Eric. The tension within their bubble popped like a fragile balloon. As he stepped into the room, saying something about urgent figures from a project, Janelle felt her heart sink. What had felt like the cusp of a dramatic transformation now hung precariously in a balance threatened by invaders of the mundane. Had they lost their moment, or was this closure not so final? Did she still have the potential to influence Richard from this disruption, or would her insight once again dissolve into silence? The possibilities lingered, dizzying in their complexity, as she steadied herself for what could come next, change or stagnation, hope or disillusionment.
She couldn't yet tell. All she could do was prepare for the unfolding drama waiting just outside those doors. Richard's eyes locked onto Eric, panic striking through him like an arrow. The air thickened around them.
The moment of revelation suspended in uncertainty. He had felt an awakening, a nascent recognition of the man he could become, but now it seemed as if the universe had conspired to snatch that moment away. He shifted, all too aware of the choices flickering like neon lights in the back of his mind. "Hey, Richard, we need to talk about the quarterly projections," Eric continued, sound waves of urgency colliding with the charged atmosphere. "Can it wait a moment?" Richard replied, the edge of desperation creeping into his voice. Eric paused, confusion creeping across his features. Janelle observed the shifting dynamics, the palpable strain creeping back into Richard's features. She sensed the internal battle resuming, the fight between old duties and new aspirations. Yet they were so close. She couldn't allow the interruption to steal the spark igniting within him. "Richard, this is important, and we're on a tight deadline," Eric insisted, oblivious to the pivotal crossroads they stood upon. Richard hesitated, torn between the familiar responsibilities dictated by his past and the glimmers of prospect Janelle had sparked within him. "I know, but can't it hold for—" "This isn't just about you," Eric cut in, leaning on the desk. "If we don't get these numbers straightened out, it will impact the entire team and all of our futures." The weight of Eric's words bore down like a physical weight. Richard clenched his fists, feeling the old reflexes surfacing. The realization that his obligations now felt stifling rather than empowering sank in. "Eric," Richard began, summoning the audacity that Janelle had ignited. "Look, I'm not here to discuss feelings," Eric shot back, a dryness saturating his tone. "We have a company to run. You need to prioritize." "It's not just about the company anymore," Richard finally interjected, his voice lifted with newfound determination. The realization that he could fight for both a thriving business and a meaningful life was exhilarating and frightening. "We need to talk about values, not just numbers." He felt Janelle's supportive energy brush against him like a steady flame, urging him onward. The risk of staying quiet loomed far larger than the risk of stepping into an uncomfortable conversation. "I'm tired of viewing my life as a series of transactions. I'm looking to create something beyond that, something sustainable for both the business and myself." Eric stared, the surprise painted across his face unraveling into irritation. "You think we can just change everything because of some revelation? That's not how the world works, Richard." "It's exactly how growth works," Richard replied, the power of his conviction coalescing around him. "I've been floundering in a cycle of fear. I won't do that anymore. I owe it to myself to reshape my legacy." As the words left his mouth, Richard was surprised by how right it felt. A confrontation that had seemed so daunting transformed into an exhilaration of potentiality, a chance to— "Look, man, that's all good and well, but we can't lose focus." Eric's tone softened, but Richard sensed a reluctance still shrouding his intentions. "You risk everything we've built, just remember that. Maybe it's time we redefine what risk really means," Richard said, his heart racing. He felt a seismic shift, emotions swirling within him, fear mingled with courage. Janelle stayed silent, watching the exchange unfold with bated breath. She sensed a fragile boundary crumbling, a burgeoning revolution quietly gathering momentum. The stakes were no longer just numbers. They had become a question of personal identity. "Right now, what I need from you is to support me in redefining our strategies," Richard pressed, drawing Eric's attention back. "It's not a step back, it's forward. We can adapt." A pause hung in the air, the residue of tension darkening their atmosphere. Eric was still processing, the gears in his mind turning slowly as the pragmatic side warred with the uncertainty of shifting deeper values. "I can't promise you that this will be easy," Eric finally said, begrudging acceptance quaking in his tone. "Nor can I promise we won't stumble," Richard shot back, "but I'm not afraid to do it anymore."
Janelle felt a rush of admiration swelling within her. The man before her was evolving right before her eyes. The risks hadn't diminished, but Richard was finally learning to drown out their suffocating whispers of doubt. Outside, the chill of uncertainty danced with the warmth of newfound hope. They were at the fringe of something significant, and, despite the hurdles remaining, the transformative dialogue had begun. But just as this fragile solidarity began to crystallize, Richard's phone buzzed with an urgent notification, canceling the air of optimism that barely took root. A decision loomed, one that could once again steer him back into the clutches of obligation. Janelle's heart raced as she leaned toward Richard, ready to engage him further, aware that the moment demanded a choice. Would he grasp the torch of transformation or surrender once more to the weight of expectation? The tension thickened, and the answer hung in the balance, ready to unfold. Richard's heart thudded in his chest as he glanced at the screen of his phone. The urgency of the notification pulsed with the momentum of the conversation, drawing him back into the relentless daily grind he had been desperate to escape. "It's from the corporate office," he muttered. His eyes flickered between the text, Eric's heavy stare, and Janelle's encouraging presence. "What does it say?" Eric leaned in, his voice tinged with curiosity, mixed with a slight undertone of apprehension. "An emergency meeting," Richard replied, his voice trailing, laced with frustration. It felt like a deliberate disruption, orchestrated to yank him back into line. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, on the verge of a breakthrough, ready to shift the focus from numbers to values, and now the relentless machinery of corporate obligation threatened to grind him down. "Again, listen, Richard, this happens all the time," Eric said, softening a bit. "You know how these things go. But you can't let your personal ambitions cloud your professional responsibilities. We have to deal with this." "No," Richard juxtaposed firmly, feeling a surprising surge of agency. "I refuse to let the old narrative dictate my actions any longer. I'm not denying my responsibilities, but I have to be clear about my direction first." There was a resilience to his voice, one that drew Janelle's admiration and Eric's questions. "Don't you see the danger in ignoring this?" Eric pressed, crossing his arms across his chest, obviously struggling to reconcile their differing perspectives. "I don't see it as ignoring," Richard replied, focusing intently on his own values. "I see it as prioritizing what's important. My personal development, our team's values. If I can align those with our business strategies, maybe we can innovate rather than just react to the numbers." Janelle felt a palpable shift in the room. The way Richard articulated his thoughts illuminated a deeper understanding of leadership, transformational, not transactional. But she also sensed Eric's increasing frustration, witnessing a storm brewing beneath his calm demeanor. "Values don't pay the bills," he shot back, the tension snipping at their fragile discourse. "This isn't a charity. You need to get the numbers right first." "And how long have we been tethered to those numbers without any real growth?" Richard countered, emboldened. "This is an opportunity, Eric, not just for the company, but for all of us to work towards something we actually believe in." As he spoke, Richard felt a warmth cascade through him, dispelling the cold pressure of obligation suffocating his spirit. He was standing for something greater than he had settled for in years, a vision that encompassed both professional and personal integrity. Eric opened his mouth, perhaps to further contest, but the way Richard stood, with a newfound sense of poise, made him hesitate. The flicker of doubt morphed into contemplation. "All right then," Eric finally sighed, tension cracking the surface of his facade. "What's the plan?" Richard hesitated briefly. He had to deliver, but the uncertainty of the next steps still loomed. "Let's outline what values mean for us, explore our integrity as a company. What goals can we set that align with our core beliefs? Then we can see if they actually translate into financial performance, instead of assuming we must sacrifice our principles to succeed." In that moment, Janelle felt a rush of hopefulness. They were no longer threading through corporate treacle. Instead, they were exploring a path carved by clarity and intention, refusing to be boxed in.
Yet as Richard prepared to further articulate his vision, his phone buzzed again, pulling him momentarily back into the demands of the outside world. Another notification flashed on the screen, drawing him abruptly back to the realities of work. "Richard, you have to make a decision," Eric said, the concern lacing his voice, hinting at the gravity of their situation. Richard opened the notification and found a detailed report, a forecast that hinted at potential layoffs unless the quarterly projections met their targets. The weight of the words crushed down on him, juxtaposing his aspiration for growth against the grim reality of survival intertwined with monetary success. In that moment, Richard faced a pivotal crossroads. Should he rally his team around a transformative vision, risking financial stability, or yield to the immediate pressures of the corporate machine and forsake his budding ideals? A choice loomed, and as he stared at the stark contrast between possibilities, a clearer understanding began to crystallize within him. The tension hung oppressively in the air, begging to know which path he would choose, and whether his newfound resoluteness would prevail against the chilling shadows of corporate obligation. But just as a decision started to form, a new message pinged on his phone, an anonymous tip about a potentially dangerous oversight in the management of their key contracts. The stakes had just become infinitely higher, and the reckoning of responsibility pressed down once again. How would Richard navigate the quagmire of truth? Would he stay true to his aspirations, or be pulled back into the cold currents of expectation? As he collected his thoughts, the real test of his transformation lingered just at the precipice of looming confrontation. The room buzzed with tension as Richard's gaze shifted from his phone to the faces of Eric and Janelle. The tip about contract management loomed ominously in his mind, a clash between his ideals of integrity and the harsh realities of corporate survival. This unexpected twist heralded not only potential fallout for the company, but also the stakes for his own personal evolution. "Do you think this is connected to the layoffs?" Janelle asked, a hint of concern creeping into her voice. Richard frowned, his mind racing through the implications. If this was a serious oversight, it could unravel everything he was trying to build. The vision of a value-driven business he had just begun to sketch felt suddenly fragile, a dream threatened by the sharp edges of reality. "Possibly," he said, the weight of responsibility starting to coalesce into a new focus within him. "But we need to verify the claim first. If there is an oversight, we can't let it slide. We can't lead from the shadows." Eric rolled his eyes, a sign of his growing impatience. "And what if it costs us? What if we expose something catastrophic and the board reacts poorly? The layoffs don't just affect us, they affect families." Richard felt the daunting pressure suffocating his resolve, not just the corporate weight of numbers, but the bleak human cost behind them. His heart sank as he latched on to the realization that the outcome of this investigation could define him, could define their team for years to come. A tempest of doubt rumbled within him, reverberating his insecurities. He closed his eyes momentarily, grounding himself. If we don't act on this, we're complicit. What good is a so-called value-setting vision if we ignore the truths that underpin it? We could still innovate while fixing our own house. This is about leading with integrity. Janelle's eyes sparkled. She understood the gravity of Richard's choice. We have to be transparent. Maybe this is an opportunity to integrate our values into practice right now. Richard nodded, heartened by her support. Clarity burst forth amid the chaos encapsulating him. This was no longer just a challenge to their corporate environment. It was an invitation to demonstrate true leadership that aligns with the transformation he sought. "Let's investigate. We need the facts first, but then we'll bring our findings to the team. I believe this is how we redefine success, rooted in responsibility." As they delved deeper into planning their next steps, Richard could feel his confidence swell. He grasped the tension as a living thing, pulsating, transforming. Decision-making began to feel empowering rather than daunting. He was shedding the skin of his past fears. Over the next few days, Richard's interactions shifted. Discussions turned to explorations of integrity and accountability, grounding themselves in both professional targets and ethical responsibility. He embraced the discomfort of transparency, inviting Eric and Janelle and eventually the entire team to join him in this ethos. Yet, despite their altercations, the pressure of the impending quarterly forecast loomed like a dark cloud. With each passing conversation, he felt a flicker of doubt creeping back in as Eric increasingly became skeptical of the focus on values. "You need to be pragmatic, Richard. You can't save the company at the expense of your dreams," he would remind Richard. This critique only deepened Richard's resolve. The confrontation wasn't just with company values, it was a direct reflection of his own values versus the inertia of corporate survival. One evening, with a combination of anxiety and excitement, Richard sat down to review the financials with a sharper focus on upcoming deadlines. He began jotting down notes, correlating financial stability with integrity, pondering how they could intertwine. Determined, fleshing out strategies underlined by ethical accountability, he ventured into planner pages filled with sketches of growth fueled by honesty and authenticity. But just when he began to feel the satisfaction of ground regained, his phone buzzed again. A stern message from the lower ranks about discontent regarding possible layoffs. It not only reaffirmed the urgency of the situation, but also re-triggered a nagging fear. What if they had miscalculated? The aching doubt ripped through his newfound resolve. As he proactively engaged those employees, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that an inevitable reckoning loomed closer, one that would not just test him, but could reveal the parts of him he had yet to uncover. The choice lay ahead: to dig deeper into ethical leadership despite the mounting pressure, or revert back to the safety of standard expectations. What was required now was not only tactical, but also an intimate understanding of who he was becoming in this process. Would he succumb to fear, or would he elevate the ideals of the workspace, standing firm against the turbulence ahead? As apprehension crept back, Richard's heart raced. This trial was merely the beginning. With the clock ticking and the stakes rising, he wondered, would he find the courage to rise above personal ambivalence, or would he be swept away by the very currents he sought to combat? Richard woke up in the early hours the next day, compelled by the pressure weighing heavily on his chest. The dim light from his bedside lamp illuminated the planner sprawled open before him, a chaotic web of notes, sketches, and fervent ideas intertwined like roots seeking stability in hard soil. His reflection stared back at him through the pages, a man teetering between aspiration and anxiety. He felt the boundaries of his former self blurring, and with it came a stirring sense of potential that was both thrilling and frightening. The clock ticked steadily in the background, a reminder that he needed to act with urgency. He suited up for work, but as he stood in front of the mirror, he caught his own eyes, sharpened by commitment yet softened by self-doubt. The thought of laying off employees weighed on him, but the potential discovery of discrepancies in the contract management process overshadowed this concern, like a storm cloud blocking the sun. A part of Richard wondered if he was losing touch with practicality. The other half believed that they were at the precipice of change. At the office, Janelle was already there, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to Richard's inner turmoil. "Ready to get to work?" she asked, a cheerful spark in her voice. "More than ready. We need to tackle the investigation into contracts," he replied, his tone steady, though internally chaotic. He couldn't afford wavering confidence. It could ripple across their entire team. As the day unfolded, the investigation transformed from figments of speculation into a firm pursuit of facts. Richard organized a meeting with his team, feeling a combination of intimidation and excitement. He laid out the concerns about the contracts and the potential implications for the company. "This isn't just about numbers," he stressed, his voice steady with conviction. "It's about our integrity as a team." If we find something wrong, we must address it head-on, no matter the cost. Eric's skepticism bubbled beneath the surface. Are you sure that's wise, Richard? If the board gets wind of this, who knows what could happen? No, I won't let fear dictate our route, Richard responded, brimming with newfound resolve. Change often comes with discomfort, but we can't be afraid to look at the uncomfortable truths if we want to evolve. The meeting sparked conversations that flickered with passion and trepidation, but Richard felt his leadership molding before his eyes. Instead of seeing the team's resistance as a challenge, he recognized it as a testament to their investment in the status quo and their fearful attachment to it. As they dug deeper, Richard's understanding of the potential fallout began to crystallize. Recognized that no matter the results, laying bare these discrepancies stood to redefine success for him and his team. The emotional weight shifted through the hours. He felt more empowered, like a sculptor unearthing a hidden masterpiece, one that reflected both ethical resolve and financial integrity. But just as the steps forward began to feel deliberate, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. A rival company was implementing massive layoffs, an act framed as a strategic realignment. Panic raced through Richard like wildfire, reminding him of the stakes and the fear of collateral damage in their own organization. The sight of this news stirred an unnerving anxiety within him. Could their ethical decision-making cost them everything, unraveling the very fabric of their company? He realized he was standing at a critical nexus, integrity challenged by instinctive self-preservation. Despite the rising tide of apprehension, a profound truth was forming within him. He was beginning to see beyond himself. This was not just about survival. It was about leaving a legacy that embodied responsibility amidst the chaos of corporate reality. Richard's pulse quickened as he considered the implications. Perhaps this challenge was what he needed to truly grow, both as a leader and as an individual. The mountain ahead was steep, but the view from the summit beckoned him with its promises of authenticity and fulfillment. And yet, the ringing menace of potential outcomes nagged at him. Would he rise to the occasion or falter in the face of inevitable repercussions? The crucial questions loomed larger, stirring a determination that felt both invigorating and harrowing. As Richard prepped to confront the realities of the layoffs and their effects, he couldn't help but wonder if this test of his character would lead to the reinvention he sought, or if it would dismantle everything he had started to build. In the shadows of uncertainty, the stakes were higher than ever. Would he be ready to face the repercussions of his pursuit for integrity? Richard braced himself as he entered the conference room, the palpable tension lingering in the air like static before a storm. The irony of the situation weighed on him. He was about to lead a discussion that could either breach the fortress of complacency or erode the very foundation he was fighting to build. His team, gathered around the polished oak table, looked to him for clarity, but he felt anything but clear. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began. "We have important matters to discuss regarding our contract management process." He could see the apprehension flicker across their faces, a mix of curiosity and fear. Would these revelations disrupt their routine, and, by extension, their livelihoods? As he spoke, Richard felt himself oscillating between confidence and doubt. The importance of transparency had driven him to push for this meeting, yet the stakes were staggering. Each member of the team was not merely an employee, but a contributor to the organization's lifeblood. He sought their eyes and found them filled with uncertainty. Janelle, her brow slightly furrowed, interjected, "Richard, do you really believe confronting this will lead us to something better? It feels risky." The question hung heavy. "It's precisely because it's risky that we have to confront it," he replied, recalling Eric's warning from the previous day. Richard took a breath, determined to shift the atmosphere away from fear. If we uncover discrepancies, we have a chance to fix what's broken and ensure everyone's future here. Isn't that worth the risk? Their nods, albeit hesitant, hinted at a cautious acceptance. The ensuing discussions morphed from simmering skepticism to a burgeoning resolve. With every shared insight and concern, Richard felt the team starting to transcend their worries, collectively embracing the necessity for change. In that moment, he recognized his own evolution. He was no longer driven by panic. Instead, he was leading with purpose. During lunch, Richard found himself in unexpected conversation with Eric, who had initially expressed doubts about their course of action. "I have to admit," Eric said, "I underestimated your vision. The more we uncover, the more I see how this could safeguard not just our jobs, but the integrity of our work." "Thanks, Eric," Richard replied, the acknowledgement lifting him further. "It's a leap, but sometimes you have to jump to discover what's waiting on the other side." And there it was, the unvarnished truth he was coming to embrace. This was about more than just solving a corporate issue. It was about creating an environment where every team member could feel secure contributing their voice, free from fear of judgment. Yet, as realization dawned, so did the weight of impending decisions. The news of layoffs from the rival company had echoed through the industry, and if his team stumbled in their quest, they risked becoming the next headline. Richard settled into the reality that confronting these issues might not only challenge the company's status quo, but could also unsettle the precarious balance of their market position. The following days blurred into an intense blur of meetings and late nights, treasuring even the briefest moments of camaraderie with his colleagues. With each passing hour, Richard felt the tension coiling tighter within him, the pressure morphing into clarity. He understood now that embracing integrity meant risking comfort. On an afternoon filled with an electrifying blend of anticipation and dread, Richard prepped for a meeting with the board to present their findings and recommendations, both daunting and liberating. He couldn't shake off the feeling that this was the catalyst that would either propel him into a future he dared to dream of, or unravel everything he'd been working tirelessly to maintain. As he stood before his team one last time, readying them for the board's possible hostility, he sensed an undeniable shift within himself. Would they stand together to face this tidal wave of change? With each heartbeat, he understood this moment would define him, not merely as a leader, but as a conviction-driven individual. As the door swung open, revealing the imposing board members, Richard's resolve crystallized. He would lead his team into the storm or go down fighting for the legacy of integrity they sought to uphold. But lurking beneath the surface of that resolve was an unsettling fear. What if they couldn't withstand the weight of their own truths? The very foundation of his leadership hinged on the precipice of uncertainty. How would he respond when the moments of truth demanded their reckoning? The conference room buzzed with a mix of anticipation and tension as Richard faced the board members, their gazes piercing through the veneer of confidence he had meticulously constructed. He stood at the crossroads of his journey, the embodiment of myriad possibilities converging into a singular, defining moment. "Thank you for gathering at such short notice," he began, grounding himself in the purpose of their meeting. The river of professionalism surged within him, and with every word he felt the ache of transformation. "Today, we need to address critical discrepancies we've uncovered in our contract management process. These issues not only threaten our financial integrity, but also the very values we've aspired to uphold." He caught sight of Janelle's supportive nod from her corner of the room, a silent reassurance bolstering his resolve. It was a stark contrast from the previous days, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. Now he was armed with the power of truth. With each detail he laid bare, Richard could feel the weight of his decisions beginning to lift. The air was tinged with the scent of impending change, profound and irrevocable. One board member, a hypercritical figure known for his blueprints of tradition, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in skepticism. "Richard, you're aware that opening this can of worms could have repercussions. Have you thought about the layoffs that might follow?" The layoffs are already a looming threat due to external pressures, Richard countered, reclaiming the reins of his narrative. But ignoring these issues jeopardizes not just our financial standing, it dismantles the integrity we've built. We must choose nourishment over the poison of inaction. I believe we can pivot toward a more sustainable strategy, one firmly rooted in our core values. The room grew silent as his words resonated, a sudden halting of breath, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the tension. He could sense the wheels of contemplation turning in his colleagues' minds. Could they envision a path that diverged from old operating procedures while preserving their financial viability? Integrity has proven its worth, Richard, the chair responded, gauging the insight with a mix of resignation and curiosity. There was the faintest acknowledgement of his argument, an opening that fueled Richard's determination. As discussions unfurled, punctuated by his team's insights and challenges, Richard found courage swelling inside him. He was no longer the anxious leader teetering on the edge of self-doubt. He had transformed into a beacon of resilience. The ethical questions they faced were not merely transactional. They were about cultivating an environment in which every employee felt valued and heard. Imagine if we redefined our success metrics, he suggested, excitement palpable in his voice. What if we prioritized innovation alongside performance, resilience alongside revenue? He could see the board considering his words deeper than before, daring to grapple with the implications of what this could mean for the company's identity. As conversations deepened, Richard recalled the transformative moments with Janelle. Her unwavering belief in the power of choice had ignited something within him that had lingered, waiting to be awakened. He understood now that standing for something meant risking the safety nets of complacent success for the more profound satisfaction of authentic leadership. Eventually, the dialogue shifted into collaborative brainstorming, and Richard could feel the weight of acceptance rise within the room. Input started flowing, walls crumbled, and ideas that had once appeared audacious began fusing into a coherent, action-oriented plan that balanced ethics with profitability. Amidst this momentum, Richard experienced a sense of fulfillment threading through him. It was the very essence of who he aspired to be. Days turned into weeks as he navigated this new landscape next to Janelle. The once foreign ideas they had discussed, integrity, responsibility, compassion, were being woven into the fabric of their operations. The pressure of impending layoffs dissipated, gradually replaced by a culture of shared advocacy for one another's stories. The journey was challenging, certainly, but every small victory affirmed their resolve. As Richard stood watching Janelle collaborate with a team of employee advocates to finalize a new values-driven project, he felt an emotion stealing over him that he had seldom embraced fully before: gratitude. Gratitude for the obstacles that had pushed him to reevaluate his purpose and seize the opportunity to create a legacy. It was in that bustling workplace atmosphere where he felt the true pulse of transformation. Richard wasn't merely overseeing numbers, he had joined a movement towards something meaningful. Reflecting on everything he had accomplished, Richard knew he had achieved not only professional recognition, but a profound personal metamorphosis. He discovered that his journey wasn't just about navigating the complexities of corporate America. It was about weaving integrity into the heart of their successes, paving the way for a new future, not just for himself, but for everyone who contributed to their shared mission. As he deliberated the bright path ahead, Richard understood one fundamental truth. He had become a leader not merely by his position, but by his commitment to uplift others. The pen of his story was firmly in his hands, and it was no longer an account clouded by fear, but rather one penned with intention and reassurance, a legacy of integrity forged in the flames of growth. This was a moment to cherish. He smiled as the team gathered to celebrate the successful launch of their new initiative. They were not just a company, they were a community. Richard finally manifested the change he sought, propelling himself with determination into the promising horizon. Reflect on this journey as your own. Path unfolds.
It's time for you to embrace your potential, carve out your own legacy, and choose integrity over fear. You need to subscribe now to join us on the next breathtaking transformation. Leave a like now to ensure these stories resonate and reach everyone seeking change. Comment below with your thoughts. What transformation do you wish to achieve? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who deserve to witness this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Support this movement of personal growth.